Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial. In this one we're going to be doing a standalone video. I've been pretty much just doing series videos for the item system series, and now I've started the RPG series. But I do want to start doing some, independent videos to do with Unity and just game development in general in between the series. So I'll be doing episode 2 for the RPG thing tomorrow. Oh, not tomorrow, but the next video, which would be in 2 days' time. So that'll be coming. That'll be about doing character movement. But one thing I want to talk about in this video, which isn't something like you need to do in your project, it's just something you can do that some people do, some people don't. It has its benefits and its disadvantages, so I'll get into talk about that. But if you've not read the title, which I'm sure you have, we're going to be talking about like test-driven development and just unit testing in general. So I'll get into that in a minute. But of course, first I gotta thank my patrons, with special thanks to Flowstate Games, Average Morning, Booderay, Thomas Huster, Remy Bowdwin, and Fullborn. If anyone else is able to help support the channel monetarily, then the link is in the description below. If not, you can help support me on Twitch, YouTube by following, subscribing, all of the above. Links are down below for the social media. But apart from that, let's get into the video. Okay, so first of all, I'm just going to show you what I've done with unit testing, just a very basic example. If you guys want me to talk more about this, if you find it interesting and useful, then I'll make another video on it at some point. But for now, I'll just keep it really basic. You can use like coroutines to do this and have more advanced testing, but we'll just keep it simple. So what is unit testing? Well, unit testing is a way to test a unit of your code, right? So if you have a project, a unit would effectively be a code or like, oh, no, a code, I mean like a class or a script, right? You want to make sure that script does its job well, or does it right. So before we talk about test-driven development, which is like a strategy for developing, unit tests are essentially just, well, in terms of Unity, you see you have this test run at the top. If you don't, you go window and where am I looking? Is it general? Yeah, general test runner. And you see how it just says health system tests. Then it says like health system underscore negative damage value param underscore exception, and it says tick. If I run it, it says tick, right? So that means it passed the test. These two tests that I've written have passed the tests. If I go show you the tests, it looks like this. So I'll obviously show you how to write this from scratch in a minute, and I'll explain it as I go through it. But what I've done is I've got a health system script over here which handles, you deal damage, you pass in damage data, which consists of the amount of damage, the damage type, and who sent it. So just whatever damage you need, data you need to pass through. And it handles basically reducing the health, and if the health's less than or equal to 0, we die. I'm going to expand upon this script, but the point is, I don't want, like, if negative damage is passed through, there's clearly something that's gone wrong. Like, you should never have negative damage pass through. It'll probably just mean that I've, like, accidentally set the damage somewhere to be negative on, like, a spell or an item. But even then, that should be something that should be raised up. Like, clearly that's a problem. Damage can be, like, maybe reduced by armor, but it would never go to negative. So if this damage value is negative, there's clearly something wrong, right? So I've put throw new argument out of range exception, which you would have to import system for. And then there's optional parameters. You could just leave it blank, but I've put damage amount, so then it tells me, basically, the parameter that's wrong is damage amount. And then I'm putting myself a little message. The damage amount can't be negative. And then that would let me, go fix it. I'd be like, oh, something's gone wrong with that negative damage value. And then I've done it for healing as well. If the heal amount's negative, heal amount can't be negative, right? And I've got that code. But let's say, obviously that works, right? I can go and physically test that in my game. I can go and try and deal negative damage, and it won't deal negative damage. But let's say later on I'm, adding to the script or modifying it, and I accidentally, without knowing, something I do might, make it so you can take negative damage. I don't know, maybe I accidentally removed that or something. You get the point, though. I might do something where negative damage is actually dealt. No matter what, if negative damage is passed in, there should be an exception raised for the argument being out of range. Now, technically, if you typed in a different exception here, you wouldn't get any errors. It would still work. The whole point is you use the exception to be explicit about what's going on, right? So if I type exception, exception. You see there's loads, aggregate, Android, Java, app domain. There's tons. I don't know what half of them are meant to be used for. You can look it up online. But out of range exception is used for, I think it'll tell you if you mouse over it. No, it doesn't. Okay, it tells you online if you look it up. It's basically for, when stuff is out of range. So a value being out of the range you want, right? My damage value being negative is out of the range I want. So I raise that event. But let's say this is wrong. Okay, it doesn't work or something, or I break it down the line. Without me actually physically going to test that, how would I know if it's broken, right? You would have to physically test everything. Obviously, when you're, playing a game and making it, you want to test systems. There's certain things you can't test in code, like, for example, the way you've built the level, you might be able to get out the boundaries. That's a different kind of error. This is actual systematic code errors. It not working how you expect it to work. So what you would do is, essentially, you write tests to fail, right? So I've written tests. I'll explain it in a minute. So I've said, all right, let's try and deal negative damage, right? So deal negative 10 damage. I've just said basically make a new game object and add the health system component to it and deal negative damage, you know. And this assert.throws, basically, if you look at assert dot fail false greater. Yeah, I'm not going to go through each of these examples in this video. You can read what they're for, or you can look them up online. But the one I've used for this example, I'll cover some of the other ones as well, is throws, right? Assert.throws. So what that means is the test will pass if this is thrown, this argument out of... So, sorry, start again. Inside this, which is essentially just calling the deal damage function, if an argument out of range exception is thrown, then it passes the test, saying essentially, yep, it's fine, we do throw the exception when we try and deal negative damage. That's good, the test passes. If we call deal damage or negative damage and it doesn't throw this exception, then the test fails. And obviously, just by pressing a button, I know it fails, so I'm like, uh-oh, something's broken in this script without me having to go test it. Just make sure whenever you change stuff to press run all, and, you know, it takes like half a second, less than that, whatever. I'm sure in a bigger game it'll take a lot longer, but you get the point. And obviously I do the same here. It looks a bit different because for dealing damage, I pass in a struct, whereas for healing, I just pass in the number. Maybe I'll pass in more data at some point, but the point is, create a new game object, add that mono behavior to it, assert.throws, exception, heal, right? And it works. But let's say, just as proof of concept that it works, if I just remove this piece of code by accident, like later on down the line, you know, sometimes you'll be refactoring code and you'll remove things you think you don't need, or you might change something and it does other things that you don't expect it to. If I now change that and I run the tests, one fails, and if one test fails, they all fail, and it tells you down here, expected system out of range exception, but was null, meaning there wasn't an exception, right? It was waiting for an exception, but there wasn't any. So I'm like, oh, clearly something's gone wrong in the negative damage value param one, okay? I'm like, negative damage value param. So we're meant to have an exception in the deal damage function. Okay, let's go to deal damage. Oh, look, I've accidentally not got this exception here. That's a comment. But yeah, you get the point. And obviously, if I fix the problem and then run it again, it'll work. Now, one thing I'm not actually going to explain fully, but that exists, is test-driven development, which is a method of writing the tests, like writing the tests for a system, and then writing the actual code for the system. So by default, all your tests will fail, and then you write the code to make the test pass. A lot of people don't like that because it has some problems with it. Like, one, it takes a lot longer and it's a bit more awkward, and when you're writing your tests, you might not actually know exactly how you want your features to work, and you might get into a problem of limiting yourself later on. Like, for example, you might write a test to not allow the inventory to go over the top if you have like a max limit. But then what if later on you change your design to be, you actually have an infinite inventory, but items have weight, for example. You then have to go back and change your tests. Ideally, the test should exist forever. Now, obviously, yeah, if you do decide to change the system, you'll have to change your tests. But yeah, the main negative people find is it takes more effort and time to write tests, but it also, people find it does save you more time in testing, obviously. So it's up to you to choose whether to do this or not. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how to set this up to how I've got it, because it's a little bit more than just writing this piece of code. But it's not that hard, so I hope you stick around for that. It'll be really quick. Let's get into it. Okay, so I've deleted any code that I've written to do with tests or any things I've set or imported or whatever. So you should be able to join on with this wherever you are. So like, no matter how your project is, you should be able to easily just, you know, join in with this. So what you want to do is you want to go to your main assets folder, probably click test runner. If you don't see it, as I said, you go window, general, test runner, and it says no test to show because I've deleted them all. So we go create edit mode test assembly folder. It recommends you call it tests. Sure, I'm happy with that. And now you've got a test folder with a tests assembly definition. So assembly definition has quite a bit on it, but all you need to worry about is the fact it lets you reference scripts from different assemblies. So this folder would be its own assembly as such. All your other scripts folders are together, but your tests are separate. I've actually tried putting the test with the scripts, but I get some other problems, so I wouldn't do that. Just keep a separate test folder, and you look on here, there's one called assembly definitions reference. So what you want to do is you want to be able to reference here your normal scripts folder so you can write code about them, right? If you want to add a component that you've written in your normal like scripts folder, then you want to reference that here. So the way you actually do that is you reference with assembly definitions other assembly definitions. So if you click select, you see all these. But these are all like, I don't know, either external add-ons you've imported or just the Unity stuff. So what you want to do is you want to press apply or whatever. go back to your actual scripts folder, and in the root, go create, and then go down or up to assembly definition there. From assembly definition, you want to call it maybe, it's whatever you want, right? So I'm going to call it game scripts. This is just like my game scripts, right? I don't know, game scripts. And then after you've written that there, you literally you don't have to do anything with that. You can just leave that empty, right? Just game scripts. The inspector usually takes a little bit to catch up. If it's compiling or something, yeah. So leave this as it is, it's fine. But if you go back to your tests now and go on to tests, and for this assembly definition, I think I have to re-edit or something. Yeah, okay, select. You see you've got all these ones, but now you've also got game scripts, your scripts folder. So select that and then press the apply button, and then it has to compile because it actually does change files. I'm using Visual Studio Code at the moment. You can actually read it here. Name game scripts has literally no other settings on it, whereas the other one in tests has other data on it, and it also references, as you see here, game scripts. So you could have actually just typed that all in code, but I use the editor to do it. So now in tests, you want to make a new test. So what did I call it? I think I called it, whoops, let's put this over here. That's just so I write the code the same as earlier. I'm going to call this health system tests. I think that's what I went for. Yeah, health system tests, okay? So let that compile. By default, it'll be a mono behavior if you've just made it for Unity. Obviously, we need to change that. So what we're doing in here, it's called it, new behavior script. So we're going to rename it to be health system tests. I think I might actually need to zoom in for you guys, maybe. Was it Control plus? Yeah, okay. I'm going to put it in a namespace. Tests, maybe? I'm not putting it with the rest of my stuff. Just keep all the tests together. It's probably not even necessary, to be honest. And you also want to make sure it's not a mono behavior anymore, because it doesn't sit on anything. It's just a class, okay? And then what you want to do is you want to write a function, okay? So we're going to write the function. It has to be a public void always. There's no return type for tests, and it's always public, so the inspector, the test runner, can access it. And now you want to, okay, there's so many different naming conventions for this, and I don't know what the best one is, right? You just pick the one you like the most. It's up to you. So what I would normally do is I would call it the thing it's for, so health system underscore, then a description of what you're actually testing. So negative damage value param, right? It doesn't really matter what the function's called. You're not actually calling it from anywhere. The inspector just uses the function name to let you know which test has passed or failed. Sorry, let me just close the internet. Close Facebook. And then at the end, after the underscore, you might put, or you should put in, if you're doing it the way I am, what you expect to happen when you pass in a negative damage value parameter. So I put exception, right? Now, obviously you could write null, you could write out of range exception, but that it depends how descriptive you want to be. If there's an exception, I at least know there's meant to be an exception when you pass in a negative damage value parameter. That's fine. And then now I want to make a health system, right? So you can't, because health system's a mono behavior, you have to add it to a game object. So I'm going to say health system is equal to a new game object, because you need a game object to put a component on, dot add component, and we pass in health system. Not like that, sorry. Health, I can't type, health system. There we go. Okay, it auto-filled it to be tests because it doesn't know what health system is, and that's because I need to import it. So if I click and using hell.combat, that's just the one I'm using. Obviously, you find it from wherever you put your thing. Then down here, I want to actually write the test, so I'm going to write assert. Now, you're going to see assert isn't there, so if I type assert dot, it's going to tell me, okay, it's Visual Studio Code's been a bit weird here. You want to use unit or nunit.framework, okay? Then you can call assert.throws, which is the one I'm going to do. So obviously when it throws the exception that you tell it, it's going to be happy with that. Now you could actually write here just exception, which is like the base class of exceptions, right? And then that would work on any exception that's thrown. Okay, I really hate this using thing now. I have to like move my mouse really quickly. The point is this lets you do it for any exception, right? but we want to do it for I mean, we don't have to be more specific than that, but I'm going to say out of range, because that's specifically what's meant to happen, right? Argument out of range exception. Then we have to use the lambda function here. I don't know if you guys have used this before. Some of you probably have. It's hard to explain what it's doing, but essentially it needs to know what to check for this exception in. So I'm going to do open close brackets, and that's just because there's no value associated with this. It's just going to be calling a function. You'll have seen this in like JavaScript as well, or TypeScript or whatever. There's other languages use this same syntax. Essentially, this is blank because there's no parameters, just like there's no parameters at the end of this function. This equals greater than is just, I guess it's just meant to be an arrow, really. That's what it's representing. And then what we're doing, health system dot deal damage. And then I'm going to open up that function onto a new line. And we're going to say we need to pass through damage data. So we need a new damage data. This is just for the case of how I've set mine up. So the damage amount, I'll put a negative value in, such as -10, can be any negative value. I'll leave out the damage type and sender because that's not necessary anyway. And then down here, I'm just going to do the formatting. I've got the wrong amount of brackets, I think. Let me think. So that opens there and closes there. Yep. And then we've got on the new line 1. Like so. What's going on here? There's the semicolon. Yep, that's a bit messy. Because I'm so zoomed in, I keep like getting lost. But the point is, we're gonna say the test passes if we throw the out of range exception when dealing damage, and here's the call of the function. But for this to actually get picked up by the inspector, you need to add a tag to the function. So go to the line before the function, and inside bracket, just write the word test, capital T for test. And then if we go back into Unity and go test runner, and press run, it passes. Obviously, if I changed it like earlier, it wouldn't pass. And then for the other one, you want to write a heal one, right? I want to test the healing one. So I'm just going to say test, go to the next line, public void is for the health system, underscore negative heal value param underscore exception. And how do we test this? Well, we're going to say, just do the same as up here, add a health system to an empty game object, and then assert dot throws an out of range exception when doing health system dot heal, passing in -10. I'll just do that on one line because it's just simple like that. And obviously, if we go back and do the test, and it'll work. Now, some of you might think, well, I've obviously written that line to do the not dealing damage if it's negative, but obviously later on you might remove it without realizing. The whole point is this code is just code to check your other code. One thing to note is if this code is wrong, if you write tests wrong, then you might be fooled into thinking your code's working in the normal game, I guess, when it isn't actually. So you got to be careful when writing this code. Keep it simple and like, how would you test this? Well, just do the thing, right? Now, I showed you assert.throws. There are some others. I'm not going to bother making more examples here, but I'll show you just like a few useful ones if you type assert. So I mean they're just obvious, like, right? So r equal takes in 2 parameters, and it just checks whether those 2 things are equal, right? If they are, then the test passes, and if they're not, then the test doesn't pass, and so on. So and you've got r not equal in case you want to check, the test to pass if 2 things aren't equal, are not the same. That's the same object, 2 objects. I don't know the difference between those 2. I can't be bothered reading it, but same and equal. I think same might be for type, but anyway, there's so many, right? Assert.contains, maybe I'm guessing you pass in a list or an object, collection and what you expect to be in it. So this, check if an object is contained in a list, right? There's so many useful things here. There'll be one for whatever you want, right? There'll always be a way to test it. So I hope you guys, maybe give this a go, even if you don't use it properly in your game. But it is very useful, and it can help you write, well, not necessarily write better code. It can, but it's more of a case of it just saves you time when testing. Because once I've written these tests, I don't have to worry about breaking that. Because if I do, the engine's going to tell me that I've broken it. So it's really helpful. But yeah, that's it for this video, to be honest. Obviously, if you can help me out on anything down below, then that'd be greatly appreciated. I'll be doing RPG Part 2 in 2 days' time, be streaming tomorrow, and so on, just the usual schedule. Hope you guys are okay with all that. Feel free to comment below what you thought about the video or what you want to see coming up soon. But apart from that, thanks for watching, and goodbye.